The dust of West Texas hides a lot of sins, but Hector Ramirez made the last mistake of his life when his cartel kicked down the door of a lonely ranch house. They wanted a staging ground. They took a little boy. They didn't know his mother was Dev Gru's deadliest ghost. To the residents of Alpine, Texas, Sarah Jenkins was just another face in the grocery store checkout line. She was a quiet, 34-year-old single mother who bought her coffee black, drove a beat-up 2014 Ford F-150, and spent her weekends fixing the fences on her 50-acre property just outside of town. She had a firm handshake and calluses on her palms that spoke of hard work, but there was nothing outwardly remarkable about her. Her 8-year-old son, Leo, was the center of her universe, a bright-eyed kid obsessed with dinosaurs and dirt bikes. But the locals didn't know about the locked biometric safe buried beneath the foundation of her barn. They didn't know that before she moved to Alpine, Sarah had spent 12 years living in the shadows of global conflicts. They didn't know she was the byproduct of a highly classified Joint Special Operations Command directive, the first female operator to silently endure and pass the grueling parameters of Bud S, serving out of the public eye as a Tier 1 sniper for Naval Special Warfare Development Group, better known as SEAL Team 6. She had retired her rifle to raise her son. She had traded the blood-soaked sands of Fallujah and the freezing mountains of the Hindu Kush for the quiet, baked earth of Texas. Peace, however, is a fragile illusion. It shattered on a sweltering Tuesday evening. The sky was bruising purple as a summer storm threatened to break over the Chisos Mountains. Sarah was in the kitchen, washing dishes, watching Leo play in the dirt driveway with his toy trucks. The low, guttural growl of diesel engines cut through the heavy air. 3 black Chevy Tahoes, their windows tinted pitch black, rolled up her long driveway, kicking up a massive cloud of alkaline dust. They didn't park politely. They fanned out, blocking the only exit, effectively boxing in the ranch house. Sarah's hands stopped moving in the soapy water. The maternal warmth in her eyes vanished, instantly replaced by the cold, calculating stare of an apex predator assessing a threat. 12 years of deeply ingrained tactical training flooded her nervous system. 3 vehicles, minimum of 4 men per vehicle, 12 hostile contacts. She dried her hands, her heart rate steadying at an eerie 60 beats per minute. "Leo," she called out, her voice perfectly calm, betraying none of the adrenaline surging through her veins. "Come inside, baby, right now." Leo scrambled up, clutching a plastic excavator, and ran to the porch. As soon as he crossed the threshold, Sarah locked the heavy oak door and pulled him behind the kitchen island. "Go to the pantry. Get in the storm shelter and do not come out until I say the code word. Go." "Mom?" Leo whispered, his wide eyes reflecting sudden terror. "Go, Leo." Before the boy could close the pantry door behind him, the heavy thud of combat boots hit the front porch. The door didn't just open. It exploded inward in a shower of splintered wood and twisted hinges as a breaching shotgun blew the lock apart. 5 men stormed into the living room. They were heavily armed, wearing tactical vests over civilian clothes, carrying short-barreled AR-15S and AK-47 variants. Their movements were aggressive but sloppy gangsters, not soldiers. Leading them was Diego Reyes, a notorious lieutenant for the Sinaloa-affiliated Times Los Valientes Times Cartel. Diego was arrogant, ruthless, and tasked with securing a new, completely isolated staging route for Hector Ramirez's latest multi-million-dollar narcotic push across the border. Sarah's 50 acres of unmonitored private land was the perfect drop zone. Sarah stepped out from behind the kitchen island. She raised her hands, trembling slightly. She wasn't actually terrified, but she knew the deadliest weapon in any ambush is the element of surprise. If they thought she was a helpless, panicked civilian, they would underestimate her. She needed them careless. "Please," Sarah gasped, forcing a waver into her voice. "Take whatever you want. I have a few $100s in the bedroom." Diego chuckled, a harsh, grating sound. He walked into the kitchen, his boots crunching on the shattered wood. "We don't want your money, Senora. We want the land. You ignored the letters. You ignored the phone calls. Hector Ramirez does not like being ignored." "I told the real estate agent I'm not selling," Sarah said, backing up against the counter playing the cornered prey. Her eyes rapidly scanned the room. 2 men by the door, one checking the hallway, Diego in front of her, and another man moving toward the pantry. The pantry. Sarah's breath hitched. The 5th man kicked the pantry door open. He laughed, reaching down. A second later, he dragged Leo out by the collar of his shirt. The boy screamed, kicking his legs frantically. "No!" Sarah shrieked, lunging forward. Diego backhanded her with the heavy steel frame of his Colt 1911 pistol. The blow caught Sarah across the cheekbone. The world flashed white, and she hit the linoleum floor hard, blood instantly welling from a deep gash under her eye. She tasted copper. "Mom!" Leo cried, struggling against the cartel soldier. Diego stood over Sarah, pointing the barrel of his pistol at her bleeding face. "You should have sold, Sarah. Now, the price has gone up. We are taking the property. And to make sure you sign the deed quietly tomorrow, we are taking the boy." "Please!" Sarah begged from the floor, clutching her bleeding face. Her mind was racing, calculating the odds of disarming Diego and killing the other four before the man holding Leo snapped the boy's neck. The geometry was bad. The risk to Leo was too high. She had to let them leave. She had to eat the loss to win the war. "You have 24 hours to sign the papers and leave the state," Diego sneered, spitting on her kitchen floor. "If you call the local sheriff, who by the way works for us, we will send your son back to you in very small boxes. Vamonos." They dragged the screaming child out the door. Sarah lay on the floor, listening to the roar of the Tahoe starting up, tires spinning in the dirt as they tore down the driveway, plunging into the gathering storm. The house fell dead silent, save for the ticking of the kitchen clock. Slowly, Sarah Jenkins sat up. The trembling in her hands stopped completely. The feigned panic evaporated. She walked over to the kitchen sink, turned on the cold water, and washed the blood from her face. Staring into the small mirror above the sink, she looked at the dark bruise forming around her eye. Tears were for the helpless. Sarah wasn't helpless. Diego Reyes thought he had just leveraged a frightened single mother. He didn't realize he had just kicked a sleeping dragon directly in the teeth. 24 hours, Sarah whispered to the empty room. "I only need 6. The storm broke, unleashing a torrential downpour over the West Texas desert. Lightning spiderwebbed across the black sky, illuminating the isolated ranch. Sarah moved with mechanical precision. She walked out of the back door, ignoring the rain soaking her clothes, and entered the old weather-beaten barn. She bypassed the rusted tractors and the stacks of hay, heading straight for the concrete utility room in the back. She pushed aside a heavy iron workbench that weighed easily 300 pounds, a feat that would have shocked anyone who had only seen her buying groceries. Beneath a false drain cover in the floor lay a biometric scanner. Sarah pressed her thumb against the glass. A green light flashed, and a hydraulic hiss echoed in the damp room as a heavy steel panel slid open. A rush of perfectly climate-controlled air greeted her. Sarah descended the metal ladder into the subterranean armory. The lights flickered on, revealing walls lined with the ghosts of her past. It was a pristine military-grade arsenal. She stripped off her blood-stained civilian clothes and began to gear up. First came the black, moisture-wicking combat shirt and tactical pants. Next, the plate carrier with level 4 ceramic armor. She strapped a customized Sig Sauer P 226 MK25 to her right thigh, the weapon she had trusted in a dozen hostile countries. She loaded flashbangs, frag grenades, and spare magazines into her chest rig. Then, she walked to the far wall and unlatched a heavy Pelican case. Inside rested her primary instrument of diplomacy, a Macmillan TAC 338 sniper rifle, chambered in, 338 Lapua Magnum, outfitted with a suppressed barrel and a state-of-the-art thermal imaging scope. It was a weapon designed to end lives from a mile away, capable of punching through engine blocks and body armor like paper. She painted her face with black and green camouflage grease, masking the pale skin and the bruised cheek. The mother who baked cupcakes for the school bake sale was dead. The operator known in classified Pentagon files only as Echo Actual had returned. Sarah climbed out of the bunker, carrying a heavy duffel bag. She didn't take the F-150. Instead, she pulled the tarp off a modified, matte black dirt bike equipped with a silenced exhaust. She strapped the rifle to her back, kicked the engine to life, and disappeared into the rainy night like a phantom. Tracking them was almost insultingly easy. Cartel thugs relied on fear, not fieldcraft. Sarah had placed a microscopic GPS tracker on the rear bumper of the lead Tahoe while feigning panic on her porch, a sleight of hand she had perfected in the crowded bazaars of Kabul. Her encrypted comms unit, synced to a secure satellite tablet strapped to her forearm, pinged the location. The signal had stopped 20 miles away at an abandoned meatpacking facility on the desolate outskirts of Mafia. The facility was an infamous local eyesore, surrounded by rusted chain-link fences and decaying concrete silos. It was perfect for holding hostages and perfect for a slaughter. Sarah killed the engine of the dirt bike a mile out. She approached on foot, melting into the shadows of the scrub brush and mesquite trees. The rain was a tactical blessing. It washed away the sound of her footsteps and masked her thermal signature. She reached a rocky ridge about 800 yards from the plant. It offered a sweeping, elevated view of the compound. Through the thermal scope of her Macmillan, the facility lit up in glowing hues of white and orange against the cold blue background of the rain-soaked desert. She counted 10 hostiles outside, 4 patrolling the perimeter fence, 3 smoking cigarettes near the loading docks, and 3 sitting inside a parked Tahoe with the engine running. Inside the main building, she saw several heat signatures on the second floor, an office overlooking the factory floor. One small, curled-up signature sat in the corner of the room. Leo. 2 larger signatures stood near him. Sarah's breathing slowed. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. The box breathing technique steadied her heart rate. She calculated the windage, a crosswind of about 5 miles per hour blowing west to east. The rain would affect bullet drop, but she knew the ballistics of the 338 Lapua Magnum intimately. She dialed in her scope. Dope data on previous engagement flashed through her mind. Target 1, she whispered to the wind. She settled the crosshairs on the chest of the guard, walking the northern fence line. He was completely unaware, looking at his cell phone to escape the boredom of the rain. Sarah gently squeezed the 2-pound trigger. The suppressed rifle spat a muted, heavy times thwip. A massive muzzle flash was swallowed by a specialized flash hider. 800 yards away, the guard's chest exploded outward. The sheer kinetic energy of the round lifted him off his feet, throwing him backward into the mud. He was dead before the supersonic crack of the bullet reached the compound. Sarah racked the bolt, seamlessly ejecting the spent brass, and acquired target 2, Thwip. The second guard on the southern fence dropped like a stone, a gaping hole through his tactical vest. Target 3, target 4. In less than 10 seconds, the entire outer perimeter was neutralized. The men smoking by the loading dock hadn't even realized their comrades were down in the darkness. Sarah shifted her aim to the 3 men inside the idling Tahoe. Shooting through auto glass required accounting for deflection. She aimed precisely at the A-pillar to punch a hole, then fired a second round through the newly created opening, striking the driver in the neck. The man in the passenger seat panicked, scrambling for his weapon. Sarah's third shot punched straight through the engine block and shattered his femur. He bled out in seconds. The sudden shattering of glass and the metallic crunch of the bullet striking the engine finally alerted the 3 men on the loading dock. They drew their weapons, shouting frantically in Spanish, aiming their rifles blindly into the pitch-black desert. They couldn't see her. They couldn't hear her. They were fighting a ghost. Inside the meatpacking plant, Diego Reyes was sitting in the rusted supervisor's office, wiping the dust off his boots. He had his phone pressed to his ear, speaking to his boss. "Yes, Jefe, the staging area is secure," Diego said confidently. "The woman was nothing, a weak little cow. We have the kid. She will sign the papers tomorrow morning, and then we will dispose of her." Suddenly, the heavy metal door of the warehouse below crashed open. One of the surviving guards from the loading dock sprinted inside, screaming, his face pale with terror. "Diego, nos están atacando," he shrieked. "They are killing us. The parameter is gone. Snipers. It has to be the Federales, or the Rangers." Diego stood up, frowning, pulling his Colt, 1911. "Shut up, you idiot. Nobody knows we are here. How many men?" Before the guard could answer, a high velocity 338 round punched through the corrugated steel wall of the warehouse, traveled 300 feet across the factory floor, and hit the guard squarely in the center of his chest. The impact practically tore him in half, spraying blood across the rusted conveyor belts. The deafening echo of the shot rolled through the cavernous building. Diego dropped his phone, the color drained from his face. That wasn't a local sheriff's rifle, that was military artillery. Up on the ridge, Sarah slung the Macmillan over her shoulder. She had thinned the herd. Now, it was time for close quarters combat. She drew the Sig Sauer, checked the chamber, and began her descent toward the slaughterhouse. The mother they had left bleeding on the floor was coming to collect. The heavy metal door at the rear of the meatpacking plant was secured by a rusted padlock and a heavy logging chain. Sarah didn't bother picking it. She retrieved a compact pair of bolt cutters from her assault pack, snipping the chain with a sharp, metallic snap times masked by a rolling crack of thunder. She slipped inside. The air was thick with the stench of old blood, ozone, and decay. The interior of the factory was a labyrinth of hanging hooks, rusted conveyor belts, and massive industrial refrigerators. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting sickly yellow pools of illumination. Sarah reached into a utility pouch and pulled out a suppressed Heckler & Koch MP7 submachine gun. She slung the Macmillan over her back. The sniper rifle was useless in tight corridors. She paused by the main breaker box on the wall. With a swift yank, she pulled the primary lever down. The entire facility plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. Panicked shouts echoed from the factory floor. Flashlight beams began to slice erratically through the blackness, revealing the dust dancing in the air. Sarah lowered her L3 Harris GPN VG, 1.8 panoramic night vision goggles over her eyes. The world snapped into a crisp, glowing phosphor green. The 4 lenses provided her with a 9.7-degree field of view, an overwhelming tactical advantage against men blindly fumbling in the dark. To her, it was broad daylight. To them, it was a tomb. She quickly analyzed the battlefield geometry. Sarah quickly assessed the factory's 3 occupied zones. 5 panicked hostiles with AK-47S scrambled erratically across the ground floor. Meanwhile, 2 static guards locked down the stairwell choke point using pump-action shotguns. Above them in the second-floor office, Diego and a final gunman barricaded themselves with handguns, holding Leo hostage. "Hold your fire! Hold your fire!" a voice screamed in Spanish from the ground floor. "Who killed the lights? Turn them back on!" Sarah moved silently, her boots making zero sound on the slick concrete. She approached Sector A. A cartel soldier was sweeping his flashlight wildly, the beam missing her by inches. As he turned his back, she stepped out from behind a steel pillar. She raised the MP7 and fired 2 suppressed rounds into his chest, and 1 into his head. The classic Mozambique drill. He crumpled without making a sound. 4 left on the ground floor. She tossed a spent brass casing across the room. It clattered loudly against a metal blood drainage vat. "Over there!" 2 sicarios yelled, turning their flashlights and firing blindly into the dark. The deafening roar of unsuppressed AK-47S in an enclosed space shattered their own hearing, rendering them deaf to their surroundings. Sarah flanked them from the left. 2 more fell, their weapons clattering uselessly to the floor. The remaining 2 soldiers realized they were being hunted by a phantom. One threw his weapon down and bolted for the front loading dock. Sarah let him go. The heavy steel doors were chained from the outside, and he would only tire himself out trying to escape. The other tried to hide inside an empty industrial freezer. Sarah simply locked the heavy latch from the outside, trapping him in a soundproof, airtight box. She moved to the stairwell, Sector B. 2 men were crouched at the top of the metal grate stairs, shotguns leveled at the bottom door. They were veterans from the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, hired muscle sent to protect Diego. They were disciplined, keeping their flashlight beams crossed to cover the choke point. Sarah didn't play their game. She unclipped an M84 stun grenade from her vest, pulled the pin, and bounced it perfectly off the brick wall above them. "Granada!" one yelled. Crack bang. The flashbang detonated with 7 million candela and 170 decibels of overpressure. In the enclosed stairwell, the concussive force ruptured their eardrums and completely scrambled their inner ear fluid. Both men dropped their shotguns, clutching their bleeding ears and screaming in agony, totally blinded. Sarah walked up the stairs, drawing her Sig Sauer P-226. She put a single bullet into each of their heads, stepping over their bodies to reach the second-floor landing. Only the office remained, Sector C. Inside the supervisor's office, Diego Reyes was sweating profusely. He held his Colt 1911 pressed firmly against Leo's temple. The 8-year-old boy was sobbing, his hands tied with zip ties, terrified by the gunfire and the sudden darkness. "Hector!" Diego screamed into his satellite phone, his bravado entirely gone. "They breached the perimeter! My men are dead! We need the QRF! Where is the convoy? The convoy is crossing the highway bridge now, Diego, the cold, mechanical voice of Hector Ramirez replied over the speaker. 2 armored trucks, 15 men. Just hold the boy. Whoever is attacking you will not risk the child. Diego hung up. He backed into the corner of the room, keeping Leo directly in front of him as a human shield. The remaining guard stood by the door, his hands shaking so violently he could barely hold his pistol. Open the door, Diego hissed. Shoot anything that moves. The guard reached for the doorknob. Before his fingers could touch the metal, the wooden door completely disintegrated. Sarah hadn't opened it. She had blown the hinges off with a specialized breaching charge. The heavy oak door slammed flat onto the floor, crushing the guard beneath it. Sarah stepped into the doorway. In her full tactical kit, face painted with camo grease, the green glow of her panoramic night vision lenses staring dead ahead, she looked like a literal demon of war. Diego leveled his gun at Leo's head. "Drop your weapons!" he screamed, his voice cracking in terror. "Drop them or I blow his brains out, I swear to God." Sarah didn't flinch. She slowly raised her hands, letting the MP7 drop to its sling on her chest. She casually flipped the night vision goggles up, exposing her cold, dead eyes. "Mom?" Leo whimpered, barely recognizing the terrifying warrior standing in the doorway. "Close your eyes, Leo," Sarah said softly. "Just for a second." "I said hands up," Diego roared, pressing the barrel harder against the boy's head. "My boss is outside. Hector Ramirez's convoy just crossed the bridge. You are a dead woman. You think you can take an entire cartel?" Sarah tilted her head slightly. A dark, chilling smile crept across her face. "Diego," she said, her voice dropping an octave, "who do you think blew the bridge?" Diego blinked. "What?" 3 miles away, on the main access highway leading into Mafia, the ground shook violently. A split second later, a massive fireball lit up the rainy night sky, turning the horizon a brilliant, violent orange. The shockwave rattled the windows of the meatpacking plant. Sarah had rigged the only structural choke point into the area with military-grade C4 on her way in. Hector Ramirez's elite reinforcements were currently burning at the bottom of a ravine. In that single fraction of a second, as Diego involuntarily looked toward the window to see the explosion, his focus broke. The gun drifted half an inch from Leo's head. Sarah moved faster than humanly possible. She drew the Sig Sauer from her thigh holster and fired. She didn't aim for the head. The risk of a reflexive muscle twitch pulling the trigger was too high. She aimed for the central nervous system junction. The bullet severed Diego's brainstem. His body shut down instantly, his finger going completely slack on the trigger. He collapsed backward like a puppet with its strings cut, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. Sarah rushed forward, holstering her weapon. She pulled a combat knife from her vest and expertly sliced the zip ties binding Leo's wrists. "Mom!" Leo cried, burying his face into her tactical rig, sobbing uncontrollably. Sarah dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms tightly around her son. The cold, mechanical operator vanished, and the mother returned. "I've got you, baby. I've got you. It's over." She held him for a long time, letting his tears wash away the camouflage grease on her neck. When he finally calmed down, she picked him up. "Are we going home?" Leo asked, his voice shaking. "Yes," Sarah whispered, "but first, I have to leave a message." She walked over to Diego's body and picked up the dropped satellite phone. The call was still connected. She could hear the chaotic, panicked screaming of Hector Ramirez on the other end, demanding to know what had happened to his convoy. Sarah brought the phone to her ear. "Hector Ramirez," she said calmly, her voice cutting through the noise on the line like a razor. The line went dead silent. "Who is this?" Hector demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and sudden creeping dread. "Who are you?" "I am the mother from Alpine," Sarah said. "Your staging area is closed. Your lieutenant is dead. Your men are ashes in a ditch." She paused, letting the silence hang heavily in the air. "If you or anyone carrying your colors ever cross into Texas again, I won't wait for you to come to my house. I will come to Sinaloa, and I will burn it to the ground. Do you understand me?" Hector Ramirez, a man who had built an empire on terror, swallowed hard. Yes. Sarah hung up the phone and crushed it under the heel of her combat boot. She carried Leo out of the slaughterhouse, stepping over the wreckage of the cartel's arrogance. The storm was finally breaking, the heavy rain tapering off into a gentle drizzle. The first light of dawn was beginning to bleed over the Chisos Mountains, painting the sky in strokes of gold and bruised purple. Sarah Jenkins loaded her son onto the back of the dirt bike, wrapping his small arms around her waist. As she kicked the engine to life and drove back toward their 50-acre sanctuary, she knew the cartel would never return. They had come looking for a victim. Instead, they had awoken a ghost. And in the dark, bloody world of the cartels, there is nothing more terrifying than a ghost that shoots back. Wow, what a pulse-pounding conclusion. Sarah proved that a mother's love combined with Tier 1 operator training is an unstoppable force. If you loved this intense, action-packed story of survival and justice, hit that like button to support the channel. Don't forget to share this incredible tale with your friends, and subscribe for more thrilling, real-life inspired storytelling. Drop a comment below letting us know what you thought of Sarah's explosive revenge. See you in the next video.